Nestled in the heart of a desolate landscape, Gravecourt Asylum stands as a chilling reminder of a dark past, its crumbling walls echoing the whispers of those who once sought refuge within. Established in the late 19th century, this institution was initially intended to provide care for the mentally ill, but over the years, it became notorious for its inhumane treatment of patients. Tales of cruel experiments, neglect, and the tragic fates of countless souls have woven a haunting tapestry that envelops the asylum. As the years passed, the once promising facility fell into disrepair, abandoned and left to the elements. Yet the stories of its former inhabitants lingered, casting a long shadow over the grounds. The air is thick with an unsettling energy, and many who have dared to enter its decaying halls report strange occurrences, disembodied voices, flickering lights, and the feeling of being watched. It is within this eerie setting that we meet our protagonist, a night watchman tasked with guarding the asylum during the witching hours. As he embarks on his nightly rounds, he is unaware of the chilling experiences that await him. The atmosphere is heavy with suspense, each creak of the floorboards and rustle of the wind heightening his senses. The watchman, a man of reason, finds himself grappling with the inexplicable as he encounters phenomena that defy logic. Shadows dance in the corners of his vision, and the air grows colder, sending shivers down his spine. The deeper he delves into the asylum's secrets, the more he uncovers the tragic stories of those who once roamed its halls, their spirits seemingly trapped in a perpetual state of unrest. As the night unfolds, he becomes increasingly aware of the supernatural elements that permeate the asylum, drawing him into a world where the line between the living and the dead blurs. Each encounter leaves him questioning his own sanity, as he grapples with the weight of the asylum's history and the restless souls that linger within. The suspense builds, and the viewer is left on the edge of their seat, eager to discover what lies ahead for the watchman. Will he uncover the truth behind the asylum's haunting legacy, or will he become yet another lost soul within its walls? The chilling tale of Gravecourt Asylum promises to captivate and intrigue, inviting viewers to explore the dark corners of a place where the past refuses to stay buried. As we delve deeper into this spine-tingling narrative, prepare to be drawn into a world where the supernatural reigns, and the echoes of history resonate with every heartbeat. The night watchman's journey is just beginning, and the secrets of Gravecourt Asylum await, shrouded in mystery and steeped in the eerie silence of the night. When the opportunity to take the night watch position at Gravecourt Asylum arose, the protagonist, a man named Tom, found himself at a crossroads. Struggling to make ends meet, he was drawn to the job primarily for its financial incentives. The pay was significantly higher than what he had been earning at his previous job, which barely covered his bills and left little room for anything else. With mounting debts and the pressure of daily life weighing heavily on his shoulders, Tom saw this position as a lifeline, a chance to stabilize his finances and perhaps even save a little for the future. The allure of a steady paycheck, coupled with the promise of minimal supervision during the night shifts, made the job seem like an ideal solution to his problems. However, what he failed to fully grasp was the weight of the asylum's dark history and the unsettling atmosphere that enveloped the place. As Tom arrived for his first night shift, he was immediately struck by the imposing structure of Gravecourt Asylum. The building loomed over him, its Gothic architecture casting long shadows in the moonlight. The air was thick with an eerie stillness, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves or the distant hoot of an owl. Despite the unsettling ambience, Tom felt a sense of excitement. After all, he was embarking on a new adventure. He had heard the rumors about the asylum, stories of hauntings and strange occurrences, but he brushed them aside, attributing them to the overactive imaginations of locals. To him, it was just an old building, and he was merely there to do a job. As he stepped through the creaking doors, the musty scent of decay filled his nostrils, and he felt a chill run down his spine. The dimly lit corridors seemed to stretch endlessly, and the peeling paint on the walls whispered tales of neglect and despair. Yet, Tom remained undeterred, convinced that he could handle whatever the night might throw at him. However, beneath his bravado lay a naivety that would soon be tested. Tom had little understanding of the true dangers that lurked within the asylum's walls. He was unaware of the tragic stories of the patients who had once inhabited the place, their suffering etched into the very fabric of the building. The night watchman position, which he had viewed as a simple job, was steeped in a history that was anything but ordinary. As he began his rounds, the unsettling atmosphere began to seep into his consciousness. The flickering lights cast ominous shadows that danced along the walls, and the silence was punctuated by the occasional creak of the floorboards beneath his feet. Each sound seemed amplified in the stillness, and Tom found himself glancing over his shoulder more often than he cared to admit. He tried to shake off the feeling of unease, telling himself that it was just his imagination running wild. But deep down, he sensed that something was off. As the hours dragged on, Tom's initial excitement began to wane, replaced by a growing sense of dread. He had expected a quiet night of monitoring the premises, but the asylum had other plans. The unsettling atmosphere weighed heavily on him, and he couldn't shake the feeling that he was not alone. Shadows flitted just out of sight, and the air grew colder with each passing minute. Despite his financial motivations, he began to question whether he had made the right choice in accepting the job. The naivety that had initially propelled him into this position was now a source of anxiety, as he grappled with the realization that he was in a place steeped in darkness and despair. The stories he had dismissed as mere folklore began to echo in his mind, and he found himself wondering if he had bitten off more than he could chew. In those early hours, Tom's resolve was tested as he faced the unsettling reality of Gravecourt Asylum. The financial motivations that had driven him to take the job now felt overshadowed by the palpable tension in the air. As he navigated the labyrinthine corridors, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, and the weight of the asylum's haunting history pressed down on him like a heavy shroud. What had seemed like a simple night watch position was quickly becoming a harrowing experience, forcing him to confront the very real dangers that lay hidden within the asylum's walls. The night was far from over, and Tom's journey into the heart of Gravecourt Asylum had only just begun. As Tom settled into his role as the night watchman at Gravecourt Asylum, he couldn't help but delve into the myriad of urban legends and warnings that surrounded the infamous institution. Before his first shift, he had scoured the internet, searching for any information that might prepare him for the eerie environment he was about to enter. What he found was a collection of chilling tales and vague warnings that only heightened his sense of unease. Online forums were filled with accounts from previous visitors and paranormal enthusiasts who had dared to explore the asylum's haunted halls. Many recounted experiences that ranged from unsettling to downright terrifying, detailing encounters with disembodied voices, ghostly apparitions, and inexplicable phenomena. The warnings were often accompanied by ominous advice: stay away from the basement, never go alone, and if you hear whispers, run. These rules, while seemingly straightforward, were steeped in superstition and fear, creating an atmosphere of dread that permeated the asylum's history. Tom found himself intrigued yet apprehensive as he read through the various accounts. The blend of superstition and fear surrounding Gravecourt Asylum was palpable, with many locals believing that the spirits of former patients still roamed the halls, trapped in a limbo of anguish and despair. The asylum had a reputation for being a place where the veil between the living and the dead was particularly thin, and the stories of those who had encountered the supernatural only served to reinforce this belief. As he prepared for his first night shift, Tom couldn't shake the feeling that he was stepping into a realm where the past was very much alive, and the warnings he had read echoed in his mind like a haunting refrain. However, the vague nature of these warnings left much to the imagination. While some accounts were detailed, others were shrouded in ambiguity, leaving Tom to wonder what exactly he should be wary of. The lack of specificity in the warnings only fueled his anxiety. What did it mean to stay away from the basement? Was it merely a suggestion, or was there something more sinister lurking in the shadows below? The online discussions hinted at a deeper, darker truth, but they never quite revealed the full story. This vagueness created an unsettling atmosphere, as Tom found himself grappling with the implications of the warnings. Were they based on genuine experiences, or were they simply the product of overactive imaginations? The uncertainty gnawed at him, and as he prepared for his shift, he felt a growing sense of foreboding. As the night wore on, Tom's mind raced with the legends he had encountered. He recalled tales of a former patient who had mysteriously vanished from the asylum, only to be seen wandering the grounds decades later, a ghostly figure appearing to those brave enough to venture near. Another story spoke of a hidden room in the asylum where unspeakable experiments had taken place, leading to the suffering of countless individuals. The implications of these legends weighed heavily on him, and he couldn't help but wonder if he would become part of the asylum's lore. The blend of superstition and fear surrounding Gravecourt Asylum was not just a collection of stories. It was a living, breathing entity that seemed to pulse with energy, drawing him deeper into its grasp. As he made his rounds, Tom found himself hyper-aware of every creak and groan of the building. The warnings he had read echoed in his mind, and he felt the weight of the asylum's history pressing down on him. The vague nature of the legends left him questioning what was real and what was merely a figment of his imagination. Was he truly alone in the asylum, or were the spirits of the past watching him, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves? The uncertainty was palpable, and with each passing hour, he felt the tension in the air grow thicker. The urban legends surrounding Gravecourt Asylum were not just tales to be dismissed. They were warnings steeped in a rich tapestry of history and fear. As Tom navigated the darkened halls, he realized that he was not just a night watchman. He was a participant in a story that had been unfolding long before he arrived. The blend of superstition and fear that surrounded the asylum was a reminder that some places hold secrets that are best left undisturbed. With every shadow that flickered in the corner of his eye and every whisper that echoed through the halls, Tom felt the weight of the warnings pressing down on him, urging him to tread carefully in a place where the past and present intertwined in a haunting dance. The night was far from over, and the legends of Gravecourt Asylum were only beginning to reveal their chilling truths. As the clock struck midnight, Tom settled into his first night on the job at Gravecourt Asylum, armed with a flashlight and a sense of determination. The initial routine was straightforward: check the perimeter, ensure all doors were locked, and patrol the dimly lit corridors of the asylum. The air was thick with an unsettling stillness, and the faint scent of mildew lingered in the corners of the building. Tom took a deep breath, trying to shake off the creeping unease that settled in his stomach. The asylum's long, narrow hallway stretched out before him, lined with peeling paint and rusted metal fixtures that seemed to groan under the weight of their own history. Each step echoed ominously, amplifying the silence that enveloped him. As he began his rounds, Tom couldn't help but feel the weight of the asylum's past pressing down on him. The walls seemed to whisper secrets, and the flickering fluorescent lights cast eerie shadows that danced along the floor. He tried to focus on the task at hand, reminding himself that he was simply there to do a job. Yet, as he walked through the empty rooms, he felt an unsettling sensation, as if unseen eyes were watching him from the darkness. The atmosphere was charged with an energy he couldn't quite place, and he found himself glancing over his shoulder more often than he would have liked. It wasn't long before the first signs of supernatural activity began to manifest. As Tom made his way down a particularly long corridor, he was startled by the faint sound of music drifting through the air. It was a soft, melancholic melody that seemed to echo from nowhere, wrapping around him like a shroud. He paused, straining to identify the source, but the sound faded as quickly as it had appeared. Confused, he shook his head, attributing it to his imagination. After all, it was an old building, and the creaks and groans of the structure could easily play tricks on his mind. Yet, the music lingered in his thoughts, a haunting reminder of the asylum's troubled past. As he continued his patrol, Tom's unease grew. The whispers began shortly after the music faded, soft and indistinct, like the rustling of leaves in the wind. He stopped in his tracks, heart racing, as he strained to listen. The voices seemed to come from the shadows, just out of reach, murmuring words he couldn't quite decipher. Panic surged through him, and he felt a chill run down his spine. Was he truly alone in this forsaken place? The warnings he had read online echoed in his mind, and he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being drawn into something far beyond his understanding. Tom pressed on, trying to maintain his composure, but the atmosphere grew heavier with each passing moment. The whispers intensified, swirling around him like a tempest, and he felt a sense of dread settle in his chest. He quickened his pace, moving from room to room, but the unsettling occurrences only seemed to escalate. Doors creaked open on their own, and the temperature dropped suddenly, leaving him shivering in the cold air. He could feel the weight of the asylum's history pressing down on him, and the stories of the lost souls who had once inhabited these halls began to take shape in his mind. As he reached the common area, the music returned, louder this time, a haunting lullaby that sent shivers down his spine. It echoed through the empty space, reverberating off the walls and filling the air with an otherworldly presence. Tom's heart raced as he scanned the room, searching for the source of the melody. The shadows seemed to deepen, and he felt an overwhelming urge to flee. The whispers grew louder, now punctuated by soft sobs that echoed through the corridors, pulling at his heartstrings. He felt a wave of anxiety wash over him, and for the first time, he questioned his decision to take this job. The combination of the eerie music and the disembodied voices was too much to bear. Tom's mind raced with thoughts of the legends he had read, and he felt the weight of the asylum's tragic history pressing down on him. The stories of patients who had suffered and died within these walls flooded his thoughts, and he couldn't shake the feeling that their spirits were reaching out to him, desperate for acknowledgement. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself, but the fear was palpable, wrapping around him like a vice. With each passing moment, Tom's anxiety grew, and he felt the urge to escape the asylum's grasp. The whispers seemed to call his name, beckoning him deeper into the darkness, and he fought against the instinct to run. He reminded himself that he was there to protect the building, to ensure its safety, but the supernatural occurrences were testing his resolve. The night stretched on, and as the clock ticked closer to dawn, Tom realized that he was not just a watchman. He was a witness to the haunting legacy of Gravecourt Asylum, and the chilling experiences of his first night would forever change him. As Tom continued his rounds through the dimly lit corridors of Gravecourt Asylum, he stumbled upon a small, dust-covered desk tucked away in a forgotten corner of the building. Curiosity piqued. He approached it, brushing aside layers of grime to reveal a weathered journal lying open, its pages yellowed with age. The name Darren was scrawled on the first page, and Tom felt an inexplicable pull to delve into the contents of this mysterious journal. As he flipped through the pages, he discovered that it belonged to a former night watchman who had worked at the asylum years before him. The entries chronicled Darren's experiences during his shifts, and as Tom read on, he felt a chill run down his spine. Darren's journal was filled with detailed accounts of his nightly patrols, and at first, the tone was relatively calm, almost mundane. He described the routine of checking doors, monitoring the security systems, and the occasional flicker of lights that he attributed to faulty wiring. However, as Tom continued to read, he noticed a distinct shift in Darren's writing. The entries became increasingly frantic, the handwriting more erratic, as if the very act of documenting his experiences was becoming a desperate plea for understanding. Darren began to recount strange occurrences that defied explanation, objects moving on their own, the sound of laughter echoing through the halls, and the feeling of being watched by unseen eyes. The once mundane descriptions transformed into vivid accounts of terror, and Tom could feel the urgency in Darren's words as he detailed his growing unease. One entry stood out in particular, dated just days before Darren's abrupt departure from the asylum. In it, he wrote about a night when the whispers became deafening, filling the air with a cacophony of voices that seemed to call out to him. He described a sensation of being drawn toward the basement, a place he had been warned to avoid. The urgency in his tone was palpable, as he implored anyone who might read his journal to heed his warnings. "Do not go to the basement," he wrote. "Something is down there. I can feel it. It's watching." Tom's heart raced as he absorbed the weight of Darren's words, realizing that the warnings were not just idle tales but a desperate call for caution. As he continued to read, Tom discovered a list of rules that Darren had meticulously documented, each one underscored by a sense of dread. "Never go alone," one entry cautioned, while another warned, "If you hear music, leave immediately." The rules were simple yet haunting, and they painted a picture of an environment fraught with danger. Darren had also noted specific areas to avoid, including the basement and certain rooms on the upper floors, where he claimed he had encountered something he could not explain. The more Tom read, the more he felt the weight of Darren's experiences pressing down on him, as if the journal itself was a conduit for the asylum's dark energy. The significance of the journal became increasingly clear to Tom. It was not just a record of Darren's time at Gravecourt Asylum, but a testament to the horrors that lay within its walls. The shift in tone from mundane observations to frantic warnings mirrored Tom's own growing anxiety as he navigated the asylum's eerie atmosphere. He felt a kinship with Darren, a shared understanding of the fear that gripped them both as they faced the unknown. The journal served as a reminder that he was not the first to encounter the supernatural elements of the asylum, and it filled him with a sense of foreboding as he contemplated the implications of Darren's experiences. As Tom closed the journal, he felt a chill run through him. a sense of urgency that mirrored Darren's final entries. The warnings etched into the pages echoed in his mind, and he realized that he was now part of a legacy that extended far beyond his own experiences. The asylum was a place where the past lingered, where the echoes of former inhabitants and watchmen intertwined, creating a tapestry of fear and uncertainty. With the journal in hand, Tom felt a renewed sense of purpose, but also a heavy burden. He understood that he had to tread carefully, for the asylum held secrets that were not meant to be uncovered. The journal had become a lifeline, a guide through the darkness that surrounded him. As he prepared to continue his shift, Tom felt the weight of Darren's warnings pressing down on him, urging him to remain vigilant. The significance of the journal was clear. It was a testament to the dangers that lay within Gravecourt Asylum, a reminder that the line between the living and the dead was perilously thin. With each passing moment, Tom felt the urgency of Darren's experiences resonate within him, and he knew that he had to heed the warnings if he hoped to survive the night. The asylum was alive with its own history, and Tom was now a part of its haunting narrative, forever intertwined with the echoes of those who had come before him. As the nights wore on at Gravecourt Asylum, Tom found himself increasingly consumed by a growing sense of paranoia. What had initially felt like a mere job had transformed into a harrowing ordeal, each shift amplifying the tension that hung in the air like a thick fog. The journal he had discovered, filled with Darren's frantic entries, weighed heavily on his mind, and he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. It was as if the very walls of the asylum were alive, their history seeping into his consciousness, feeding his fears and amplifying his anxieties. Every creak of the floorboards and every flicker of the light sent his heart racing. Tom began to notice shadows that seemed to dart just out of sight, and he often found himself glancing over his shoulder, convinced that someone, or something, was following him. The feeling of being watched was pervasive, an invisible presence that loomed over him, making his skin crawl. He tried to rationalize it, telling himself that it was just the building settling or his imagination running wild. But deep down, he knew that something was off. The asylum had a way of getting under his skin, and the oppressive atmosphere only served to heighten his unease. As the nights progressed, the unsettling occurrences became more pronounced. The music that had first drifted through the halls like a ghostly whisper now played with alarming frequency. It was a haunting melody that seemed to echo from the depths of the asylum, wrapping around him like a shroud. Tom would often find himself standing still, straining to pinpoint the source of the sound, only to have it fade away as quickly as it had come. The melody was both beautiful and terrifying, a siren's call that beckoned him deeper into the darkness. Each time he heard it, a chill would run down his spine, and he felt an overwhelming urge to flee, yet he was inexplicably drawn to it. Alongside the music, the whispers returned, more insistent than before. They seemed to call his name, soft and seductive, weaving through the air like a thread of smoke. Tom! Tom! The voices echoed in his mind, and he found himself straining to understand what they were saying. Were they warning him, or were they inviting him to join them? The ambiguity of their intent gnawed at him, and he felt a growing sense of dread. The whispers were no longer just background noise. They had become a constant companion, a reminder that he was not alone in the asylum. The psychological impact of the atmosphere was profound, and Tom felt as though he was teetering on the edge of sanity. The combination of the music and the voices began to blur the lines between reality and hallucination. Tom would often find himself questioning his own perceptions, wondering if he was losing his grip on reality. The isolation of the asylum, coupled with the oppressive weight of its history, created a perfect storm for his mind to spiral into paranoia. He would sit in the common area, trying to gather his thoughts, only to be interrupted by the sound of laughter echoing through the halls. Laughter that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere all at once. It was a chilling reminder of the lives that had once filled the asylum, and it sent shivers down his spine. As the nights dragged on, Tom's sleep deprivation began to take its toll. He found it increasingly difficult to focus, his mind clouded by fatigue and fear. The shadows that danced along the walls seemed to grow darker, and the whispers became more pronounced, as if they were feeding off his growing anxiety. He felt trapped in a nightmare from which he could not awaken, and the asylum's atmosphere became a suffocating presence that threatened to consume him whole. The psychological impact of his surroundings was undeniable. He felt as though he was losing himself to the very essence of the asylum. One particularly harrowing night, as Tom made his rounds, he was struck by an overwhelming sense of despair. The music played softly in the background, a haunting lullaby that seemed to mock his fear. The whispers grew louder, calling his name with an urgency that sent his heart racing. "Tom, come to us," the voices seemed to echo from the depths of the asylum, and he felt an inexplicable pull toward the source. It was as if the building itself was beckoning him, urging him to uncover its secrets. But with each step he took, the weight of dread pressed down on him, and he fought against the urge to run. The tension in the air was palpable, and Tom could feel the walls closing in around him. He was acutely aware of the history that surrounded him, the pain and suffering that had permeated the asylum's very foundation. The psychological impact of the atmosphere was suffocating, and he felt as though he was being drawn into a web of despair from which there was no escape. The music, the whispers, the shadows, they all conspired to unravel his sanity, and he knew that he had to find a way to break free from the asylum's grip before it consumed him entirely. With each passing night, Tom's paranoia deepened, and he realized that he was not just a watchman. He was a participant in a haunting narrative that had been unfolding long before he arrived. The asylum was alive with its own history, and he was now a part of its dark legacy. As the tension mounted and the fear threatened to overwhelm him, Tom understood that he had to confront the source of his terror if he hoped to survive the night. The echoes of the past were calling to him, and he knew that he could no longer ignore the chilling reality of Gravecourt Asylum. As the nights at Gravecourt Asylum dragged on, Tom found himself spiraling deeper into a psychological abyss. The once clear lines between reality and hallucination began to blur, creating a disorienting landscape where he could no longer trust his own senses. Each shift felt like a descent into madness, and the oppressive atmosphere of the asylum weighed heavily on his mind. The whispers that had once seemed distant now echoed in his thoughts, intertwining with his fears and doubts, making it increasingly difficult to discern what was real and what was a figment of his imagination. Tom often caught himself staring into the shadows, convinced he saw figures lurking just beyond the reach of his flashlight. The flickering lights cast eerie shapes on the walls, and he would find himself questioning whether the movement he perceived was merely a trick of the light or something more sinister. The music that had once haunted him now played on a loop in his mind, a haunting melody that seemed to taunt him with its familiarity. He would hear it in the silence, even when he was certain there was no sound, and it filled him with a sense of dread that gnawed at his sanity. The rules that Darren had documented in his journal became a source of torment for Tom. He had tried to adhere to them, but the very act of following them felt like a losing battle against the asylum's dark influence. Never go alone, the journal warned, yet he found himself wandering the halls in solitude, the isolation amplifying his fears. The more he tried to follow the rules, the more he felt the weight of their consequences pressing down on him. Each time he heard the whispers calling his name, he felt an overwhelming urge to respond, to venture deeper into the asylum's depths, despite knowing the dangers that lay ahead. The struggle between his instincts and the warnings he had read became a constant battle in his mind. He felt like a marionette, strings pulled by unseen forces, and the asylum was the puppeteer. The consequences of breaking the rules loomed large in his thoughts, yet the allure of the unknown was intoxicating. He often found himself standing at the threshold of forbidden areas, the basement in particular, where Darren had warned of something sinister lurking in the shadows. The temptation to explore was almost unbearable, and he felt a magnetic pull toward the very places he knew he should avoid. As the nights progressed, Tom's mental state deteriorated further. The feeling of being trapped within the asylum became all-consuming. The walls seemed to close in around him, and he felt as though he was living in a nightmare from which he could not awaken. The isolation was suffocating, and he longed for the comfort of the outside world, for the sun's warmth and the sound of life beyond the asylum's gates. But each time he glanced at the barred windows, he was reminded of his confinement, and the reality of his situation settled heavily on his chest. The asylum had become a labyrinth of fear, and Tom felt like a prisoner within its walls. The shadows whispered secrets that he could not comprehend, and the music played on, a haunting reminder of the lives that had once filled the space. He often found himself pacing the corridors, his mind racing with thoughts that spiraled into paranoia. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, and he felt as though they were urging him to join them, to surrender to the darkness that enveloped the asylum. The psychological impact of his surroundings was profound, and he felt as though he was losing himself to the very essence of the building. Tom's dreams, when he managed to find sleep, were filled with nightmarish visions of the asylum's past. He would see the faces of former patients, their eyes filled with anguish, reaching out to him as if pleading for help. The dreams blurred the lines between reality and hallucination, leaving him disoriented and fearful upon waking. He would often sit up in bed, drenched in sweat, heart racing, unsure of where he was or what was real. The asylum had seeped into his subconscious, and he felt as though he was being haunted not just by the spirits of the past, but by his own mind. The struggle to maintain his grip on reality became increasingly difficult. Tom found himself questioning his own thoughts, wondering if he was truly experiencing the supernatural occurrences or if they were merely manifestations of his deteriorating mental state. The tension in the air was palpable, and he felt as though he was teetering on the edge of a precipice, ready to plunge into the abyss. The asylum was a living entity, and he was caught in its web, unable to escape the psychological torment it inflicted upon him. With each passing night, Tom felt the weight of the asylum's history pressing down on him, suffocating him in its grasp. The feeling of being trapped was inescapable, and he knew that he had to confront the darkness that surrounded him if he hoped to reclaim his sanity. The whispers, the music, the shadows, they were all part of a narrative that he could no longer ignore. As he navigated the treacherous landscape of his mind, Tom understood that he was not just fighting against the asylum's haunting presence. He was battling for his very soul. The night stretched on, and the struggle for clarity became a desperate race against time. as he fought to break free from the asylum's grip before it consumed him entirely. As Tom navigated the dimly lit corridors of Gravecourt Asylum, the oppressive atmosphere weighed heavily on him, a constant reminder of the horrors that lurked within its walls. The whispers had grown louder, more insistent, and the music that haunted his night seemed to echo from the depths of the building, drawing him toward the forbidden areas he had been warned to avoid. It was during one of these restless nights that he stumbled upon the door to Ward B, a place that Darren's journal had described in chilling detail. The door was slightly ajar, and a cold draft seeped through the crack, sending shivers down Tom's spine. Against his better judgment, he pushed the door open, the creaking hinges sounding like a warning bell. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with despair. The walls were stained with age and neglect, and the faint scent of decay hung in the air. Tom's heart raced as he stepped into the ward, the dim light from his flashlight flickering ominously. It was then that he saw him, Darren, or at least what remained of him. The sight was enough to freeze Tom in place. Darren was slumped against the wall, his eyes wide and unseeing, a look of terror etched across his face. Tom's breath caught in his throat as he took in the scene. It was clear that Darren had met a horrific fate. The journal had hinted at the dangers of the asylum, but nothing could have prepared Tom for the reality before him. As he approached Darren's lifeless body, a chill swept through the room, and the air crackled with an otherworldly energy. Tom felt a sudden rush of fear, as if the very essence of the asylum was alive and aware of his presence. The whispers intensified, swirling around him like a tempest, and he could hear his name being called, mingled with Darren's voice. "Tom, help me!" The sound sent a jolt of panic through him, and he stumbled backward, his mind racing with questions. What had happened to Darren? How had he ended up here, in this forsaken place? Suddenly, the lights flickered violently, plunging the ward into darkness before illuminating once more. In that brief moment of blackness, Tom felt a presence behind him, cold and malevolent. He turned quickly, but there was nothing there, only the oppressive silence of the asylum. The urgency of his situation hit him like a wave. He needed to escape this place before it consumed him as it had Darren. The supernatural elements that had haunted him since his first night were now manifesting in terrifying ways, and he felt the walls closing in around him. As he backed away from Darren's body, the whispers grew louder, almost deafening. They seemed to echo from the very walls of Ward B, a cacophony of voices that filled his mind with dread. "Stay, stay with us," they urged, and Tom felt an overwhelming pull toward the shadows that danced along the edges of the room. The air grew colder, and he could see his breath misting in front of him, a sign that something was very wrong. The atmosphere was charged with a palpable energy, and he could sense the spirits of the asylum reaching out, desperate for acknowledgement, desperate for release. Tom's heart raced as he turned to flee, but the door he had entered through slammed shut with a resounding bang, trapping him inside. Panic surged through him, and he pounded on the door, shouting for help, but the only response was the echo of his own voice. The whispers morphed into a chorus of anguished cries, and he felt the weight of their sorrow pressing down on him. Help us," they pleaded, and Tom realized that he was not just facing the remnants of Darren's fate. He was confronting the collective pain of all those who had suffered within these walls. In a moment of sheer desperation, Tom turned back to Darren's body, searching for answers. He noticed the journal clutched tightly in Darren's hand, its pages stained and torn. With trembling fingers, he pried it free, flipping through the entries that had once offered him guidance. But now, they were filled with frantic scrawls, the words becoming increasingly illegible as Darren's mental state deteriorated. The last entry was a frantic plea, "They're coming for me. I can't escape. If you find this, don't stay. Leave while you can." The urgency in Darren's words sent a chill down Tom's spine, and he felt the weight of the asylum's history pressing down on him. Suddenly, the lights flickered again, and Tom felt a cold breeze sweep through the ward, carrying with it the unmistakable scent of decay. The shadows deepened, and he could see figures forming in the corners of his vision, ghostly apparitions of former patients, their faces twisted in anguish. They reached out to him, their hands grasping at the air, and Tom felt a surge of terror. He was trapped in a nightmare, surrounded by the very souls that had once inhabited this place, and he knew he had to escape before he became one of them. With a newfound determination, Tom rushed toward the door, pounding on it with all his strength. "Let me out! Please!" he shouted, desperation lacing his voice. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of voices urging him to stay, to join them in their eternal suffering. But he refused to succumb to their pleas. Summoning every ounce of courage, he threw himself against the door one last time, and to his relief, it swung open, spilling him out into the dimly lit corridor. Gasping for breath, Tom stumbled away from Ward B, the echoes of the asylum's horrors still ringing in his ears. He could feel the weight of Darren's fate pressing down on him, a chilling reminder of the dangers that lurked within the asylum's walls. The urgency of his situation was clear. He had to escape before the darkness consumed him, just as it had claimed Darren. As he raced through the corridors, the whispers faded into the distance, but the memory of that night would haunt him forever, a reminder of the horrors that lay within Gravecourt Asylum. As Tom approached his final night at Gravecourt Asylum, a sense of dread settled over him like a heavy fog. The cumulative weight of his experiences, the whispers, the music, the shadows, had taken their toll, and he could feel the very essence of the asylum wrapping around him, tightening its grip. The rules that had once seemed like a lifeline now felt like chains, binding him to a fate he could not escape. He had tried to adhere to Darren's warnings, but the allure of the unknown had become too powerful to resist. The boundaries between reality and hallucination had blurred to the point where he could no longer distinguish between the two, and the asylum had become a living nightmare. As the clock ticked closer to midnight, Tom found himself wandering the familiar corridors, each step echoing with the memories of his time spent within these walls. The air was thick with an unsettling energy, and he could feel the whispers rising around him, a chorus of voices that seemed to beckon him deeper into the heart of the asylum. "Stay with us, join us," they called, and he felt an overwhelming pull toward the shadows that danced just beyond the reach of his flashlight. The fear that had once gripped him now morphed into a strange sense of acceptance, as if he were finally succumbing to the asylum's dark influence. In a moment of reckless abandon, Tom decided to break the rules he had so diligently followed. He ventured toward the basement, the very place Darren had warned him to avoid. The door loomed before him, its surface warped and weathered, and he felt a surge of adrenaline as he pushed it open. The darkness within was suffocating, and the air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decay. As he descended the creaking stairs, the whispers grew louder, swirling around him like a tempest, urging him to continue. "You're one of us now," they seemed to say, and he felt a chilling thrill course through his veins. As he reached the bottom of the stairs, Tom was engulfed in darkness. The faint light from his flashlight flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. It was here that he felt the true weight of the asylum's influence. The walls seemed to pulse with a life of their own, and he could hear the faint echoes of laughter and cries of despair reverberating through the air. The basement was a graveyard of memories, a place where the spirits of the past lingered, and he could feel their presence pressing in on him. It was as if the very fabric of the asylum was alive, feeding off his fear and despair. In that moment, Tom realized he was trapped, not just physically within the asylum, but mentally and spiritually as well. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. He had become a part of the asylum's dark narrative, a pawn in its twisted game. The walls that had once felt like a prison now felt like a sanctuary, a place where he could finally let go of the burdens that had weighed him down for so long. The fear that had consumed him began to dissipate, replaced by a haunting sense of belonging. He was no longer just a night watchman. He was a vessel for the asylum's history, a conduit for the pain and suffering that had unfolded within its walls. As he stood in the darkness, Tom felt a transformation taking place within him. The whispers grew louder, wrapping around him like a shroud, and he could feel the spirits of the asylum reaching out, welcoming him into their fold. "You are one of us now," they chanted, and he felt a sense of peace wash over him. The fear that had once gripped him was replaced by a profound understanding of the asylum's legacy. He was no longer an outsider. He was part of something greater, a tapestry woven from the threads of countless lives lost and forgotten. But as the realization settled in, a flicker of doubt crept into his mind. Was this truly what he wanted? The haunting nature of the asylum's influence was undeniable, and he could feel its darkness seeping into his very soul. The laughter that echoed through the basement was no longer a welcome sound. It was a reminder of the lives that had been shattered within these walls. Tom felt a pang of regret, a longing for the life he had left behind, but it was too late. The asylum had claimed him, and he could feel its grip tightening around his heart. As the night wore on, Tom found himself caught in a whirlwind of emotions. The whispers grew more insistent, urging him to embrace his new reality, to surrender to the darkness that surrounded him. He could feel the spirits of the asylum swirling around him, their energy pulsating through the air. The culmination of fear and acceptance had transformed him into something otherworldly, a being caught between the realms of the living and the dead. The asylum had become his home, and he was now a part of its haunting legacy. In those final moments, as the clock struck midnight, Tom understood that he was no longer just a man. He was a guardian of the asylum's secrets, a keeper of its dark history. The transformation was complete, and he felt a sense of liberation wash over him. The fear that had once consumed him was replaced by a haunting clarity, a realization that he was now intertwined with the very essence of Gravecourt Asylum. As the whispers enveloped him, he surrendered to the darkness, embracing his fate as he became one with the shadows, forever bound to the asylum's chilling legacy. As we draw to a close on our exploration of the chilling experiences at Gravecourt Asylum, it's essential to recap the key points that have unfolded throughout this haunting narrative. From the very beginning, we witnessed the unsettling atmosphere that enveloped the asylum, a place steeped in a dark history of suffering and despair. Our protagonist, Tom, embarked on a journey that began with financial motivations but quickly spiraled into a harrowing ordeal filled with supernatural occurrences. The whispers that echoed through the halls, the haunting music that seemed to call out to him, and the shadows that danced just beyond his vision all contributed to an atmosphere thick with tension and fear. Tom's discovery of Darren's journal served as a pivotal moment in his journey, revealing the tragic fate of a previous night watchman who had succumbed to the asylum's dark influence. The warnings documented within those pages became a lifeline, yet Tom found himself drawn to the very places he had been cautioned to avoid. This conflict between instinct and curiosity ultimately led him to confront the horrors of Ward B, where he encountered the chilling remnants of Darren's fate. The culmination of fear and the breaking of rules Darrened a turning point for Tom, as he realized he was not just a visitor but a participant in the asylum's haunting legacy. Throughout the video, we have emphasized the importance of heeding warnings and respecting boundaries. The stories shared serve as a stark reminder that some places hold secrets that are best left undisturbed. The asylum's influence is palpable, and those who dare to enter its walls must be prepared to face the consequences of their actions. Tom's transformation into a guardian of the asylum's dark history underscores the idea that once you step into such a realm, there may be no turning back. The chilling experiences at Gravecourt Asylum are not merely tales of horror. They are cautionary tales that urge us to respect the boundaries set by those who came before us. As we conclude this exploration, we encourage you, our viewers, to reflect on the implications of Tom's journey. The haunting nature of Gravecourt Asylum serves as a reminder of the fragility of the human mind when confronted with the unknown. It challenges us to consider the stories that linger in the shadows and the souls that remain trapped within the walls of forgotten places. The experiences shared throughout this video are not just entertainment. They are a call to acknowledge the past and to approach such locations with reverence and caution. If you found this exploration of Gravecourt Asylum intriguing, we invite you to subscribe to our channel for more content that delves into the eerie and the unexplained. Your support helps us continue to uncover the mysteries that lie hidden in the shadows, and we appreciate every like and share that helps spread the word. Join our community of fellow explorers and enthusiasts as we embark on more journeys into the unknown, where every story has the potential to reveal chilling truths and haunting experiences. Thank you for joining us on this spine-tingling adventure through Gravecourt Asylum. Remember, the next time you hear whispers in the dark or feel the weight of unseen eyes upon you, it might be wise to heed the warnings and respect the boundaries of the past. Until next time, stay curious, stay cautious, and keep exploring the mysteries that lie just beyond the veil.